All right, ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to GLAG 21. I'm joined here today by two guests, and we're following along on this vein of looking internationally. As our question pertains today, how do we take action in those international settings? So I have with me a teacher and a program coordinator and actually a partnership manager with me. And so would you guys be willing to introduce yourselves today?
Absolutely. My name is Ben. I work at EF Educational Tours, and I'm the partnerships manager for educators in Pennsylvania looking to bring their students on an international experience.
And I'm David. I'm an ag teacher at Milton Area High School in Pennsylvania, and I've previously led 2 global excursions with my agriculture students to Europe and South America, and I have 2 more planned in the upcoming years. I'm excited to share some opportunities with you.
A great professional development experience around global learning in agriculture online.
But we realized that people were really excited about having these conversations
because agriculture is so different in different countries.
Ladies and gentlemen around the world.
With that, I think we're just about ready to get things kicked off.
And now for the good stuff.
We're excited to talk to you about how you can explore global agriculture with your students through the EF Tours travel company. Education First Tours is excited to offer some new global experiences for you and your students. So let's talk about what we're gonna speak to you about briefly. As far as the quick agenda, first off, we're going to talk about why you should travel with EF Tours. And if you don't know much about the company or you've heard about them before, we're excited to unveil to you new visions and initiatives in the career and tech education world. And we're going to talk about what you should expect from an agriculture-focused tour, specifically focusing on the Dominican Republic and Ireland, 2 itineraries we're going to unveil to you. And in our closing conversation, we'll reflect on what we've presented and talk about how you can contact us and give you access to those full itineraries that you probably are already like, what do we do when we travel? We'll unveil those to you as well at the end of the presentation. So first and foremost, that travel company that the history teachers in your school may have been using, or you may have heard of world language teachers traveling abroad with EF Tours, this company is now offering immersive global agricultural experiences. And I'm here to tell you, you should travel with EF Tours because you're really busy and you don't have time to do all the work yourself. So instead of focusing on being a travel agent, traveling with EF Tours allows you to focus on being the group leader. I know that when I have traveled previously to Europe and South America with my students, I do my best to focus on the reflection pieces and building relationships with my students and not having to deal with a tour bus that didn't show up and trying to call on an international cell phone and get another bus. My parents and guardians have always expressed to me that safety is their #1 concern. And I feel like when I travel with EF Tours, my #1 concern is focusing on the students. And then I have individuals on the ground with us 24/7 who can focus on the other details. So I get to be an educator first and less of a travel agent.
Awesome. Yeah, and David, to that point, I mean, EF stands for Education First. And while we are great at, travel experiences, our roots are in international education, high school exchange, brick and mortar language schools. So what that means for teachers is that the students are guaranteed to have an immersive educational experience, not just a sightseeing tour. And we're global. We're in 500 schools and offices in 53 different countries. So what this means is that our local staff in the countries that we're visiting are making those connections and partnerships so that teachers don't have to do all the heavy lifting. And to that point, I mean, David mentioned this, in addition to taking the planning off of your plate, EF is here to cover all of the safety and the liability. So that means background checks for all adult travelers, hotel checks, vetting the best and safest bus companies, and above all, for the administrators in the room, holding the liability if anything were to happen. And to this point of this being an educational experience, EF, we help our students prepare for the future by teaching them more about the world, more about themselves, and more about themselves in the world. So what you're seeing here is our learning outcomes, and something that we're rated and asked for our educators to talk about when they complete their tour in these 4 boxes to the right here. But what you're seeing here is every student's going on the same physical journey. They're taking the same flights, they're on the same buses, eating the same meals, going on the same walking tours. But what makes this a very individual experience is the personal journey. Each student is making their own connections. They're being challenged in very different ways. They're taking pride in a unique setting, and they're able to reflect, which really makes this a very personal experience for them.
And with EF Tours taking the responsibility of the logistics of the itinerary, I get to focus on customizing it at the individual level for my students. I get to focus on building relationships. I get to monitor them one-on-one, and I get to foster that educational experience. So what can you expect from an agriculture-focused tour? I've been so impressed with the past trips that I've taken about how experiential and how hands-on they are. And when you get a peek at these itineraries, you'll be very impressed that at least 3 days of the trip are spent on production facilities with industry experts in the area. Some really innovative locations with some non-substitutable crops and commodities that aren't common in the continental United States. And those industry experts on the ground truly don't just say, here's my production facility, do you have any questions? No, the students are really going from farm to fork about how we take an agricultural crop commodity, pineapples, for example, and we produce those to a finished product through the processing and the marketing and getting it on the shelves in the grocery stores to the consumer.
So David and I wanted to share 2 itineraries with you today. The first being agriculture in the Dominican Republic. This tour's main theme is obviously agriculture, but includes the science behind plants and crop production, the chemistry behind soil, the whole process of producing and marketing and selling food, sustainability, the similarities and differences between agriculture in the Dominican Republic and the United States. When we think of the Dominican Republic, we think of white sandy beaches, but the island has so much more to offer for tourism. I mean, they're the main exporter of tropical fruits and tobacco and coffee and chocolate, all things that we know. Many don't know that the Dominican Republic is a producer of rice. And so students will spend a majority of their time focusing on the production of pineapple. Students will be there in the field, experiencing the crop, the processing plant, how it's brought to the table. Students get an inside look into agricultural techniques from the Environmental Institute that we partner with, including agroforestry and organic farming and terrace farming. And they even get to see an opportunity here like pineapple farms and the bananas and working with saplings. And then you'll see here in this kind of bottom picture, they do a composting activity and experimental farm.
And my students and I are actually scheduled to take this trip in the summer of 22. And I was super impressed and excited about this unique agriculture-focused itinerary that we signed up immediately.
The other itinerary that we wanted to highlight today is agriculture in Ireland. And through this itinerary, students will experience everything from a big commercial farm, but we'll actually have a main focus on family-owned, family-run farms. There's an old school flour mill demonstration, tour of a bog, production of brown bread and cheese production. But when we think of agriculture in Ireland, first thought may be sheep farming. Students get an experience a sheepdog demonstration, how sheepdogs are handled, what sheep, how sheep are sheared, and kind of a hands-on learning on a sheep farm specifically. Potatoes, it wouldn't be Ireland if we weren't talking about potatoes. Students have the opportunity to immerse themselves on a potato farm, how it's harvested, how it's brought to the table. So again, kind of the 3 full days of hands-on experiences, meeting with the industry experts, and kind of getting this holistic view of bringing farm through production to the table. All the while, some of the areas of agriculture that don't come front of mind when we think of Ireland, like cattle farming, visiting a trout farm and the importance of fisheries in agriculture, and kind of the tour of a pork and dairy farm as well. So for those of you, who's in, who wants more information, you can visit eftours.com/contact us. Just want to highlight here that we want to look at the teachers and group leaders piece, and then mention that you are attending and viewing the GLAG 21 Agriculture Conference, just so we know what you're interested in and how we can get you involved.
very good. Fantastic, guys. I appreciate that presentation. And I think a lot of teachers out there that are not only looking at your backgrounds, but also dreaming about being in some of these exotic areas, right? They're thinking about this. They're excited to take students there. And, this is a big dream for them. I actually had a trip planned for this last spring to take a group of kids down to Belize. And unfortunately, some things happened around the world. And so I had to push that off a little bit. But being a teacher that's tried to plan this myself, one of the first questions that I have to ask is, all right, well, what kind of opportunities do I have to make this a little bit more affordable? What kind of fundraising opportunities are out there? So from the teacher's perspective, as well as from EF, how do we make this happen money-wise?
I think that from an ag teacher's perspective, I definitely let students who are interested in traveling on these tours have a portion of the proceeds from your traditional FFA fundraisers, your fruit sales, your agricultural product sales. But we've gotten a little bit innovative and creative. We've done T-shirt sales. We've gotten sponsors for our T-shirts, and we've done Milton Area FFA going global in summer 2022. We've sold those commodities, and we've also given the connections between our fruit sales, such as the citrus and the pineapple crops that we would sell for our fruit sale, and made that connection to, you want to know where this really comes from? It helps me with recruitment, but it also helps me with fundraising. Let's go see a pineapple plantation in the Dominican Republic, for example, in the summer of 2022. And I'll also focus on the point that I could build or try to build this itinerary myself from scratch, but I don't have the contacts on the ground. I don't have the opportunity to get there and vet the hotels and the farms and the experiences beforehand. I can focus more and spend more time on fundraising because I'm not doing all the logistics.
Absolutely. And to that point, I mean, EF has been around for over 50 years. So we've been able to make these partners that want to work with us and want to give us, the best value for what we're providing. In addition to that, we never want price or cost to be a barrier for a student exploring the world and learning more about themselves. So we do offer a global citizen scholarship, which is both needs-based and merit-based. We offer $1,000 scholarships a year, and students submit a video of 2 to 3 minutes on why or what global education means to them, what does global citizenship mean to them, and then we kind of select from there.
Fantastic. That is really, really exciting to me. I think that's, for a lot of kids, they're kind of used to writing scholarships anyways and doing videos. And I think that'd be very comfortable for them, as well as making it much more realistic to have these opportunities. That's fantastic to hear both of those ends. Okay, so building off of that then, I'm a teacher. I want to take action. I want to do this. How do I go about recruiting the students? Not only one, that are going to financially be able to swing it, but two, are going to be invested in the educational part of it.
The best recruitment strategies that work for me is actually talking about it one-on-one with my students and between me and my classes, and showing them pictures or videos of the experiences they're going to have on the grounds. I convey to them and share with them my own travel experiences that I was fortunate enough to, as a leader in the FFA and a college student, have 4 or 5 different global experiences before I actually started my teaching career. And not all my students may be that fortunate. So I tell them, I'm offering this experience to you right now. And I wish that a teacher would have done that to me in high school. And when they empathize with that, I feel like I'm really able to hook them and recruit them very quickly.
Fantastic. Yeah, I like that. Just having like those small interactions there to make it a little more intimate and tailored towards those students. And Ben, a more specific question for you on your end. So building partnerships. Right? I think as a teacher, we're always curious about what you guys do to lay the groundwork in these countries to determine the best farms to go check out, the best places to go eat with the kids. How do you build these partnerships? How do you take action in those first steps to develop the partnerships and to make sure that they're thoroughly vetted and going to be good places for kids?
Absolutely. So it's a mixture of our local staff on the ground in, for example, the Dominican Republic and in Ireland, who are going and visiting them firsthand. When we first launch a new itinerary or a new tour, we always do some sort of testing tour before our customers and our students go to these locations to make sure that the flow works and that we're using the right vendors. And then David can probably speak to this even, but after you return from tour, every group leader and teacher is filling out an evaluation of their tour. And then after each season, we're always kind of checking over those evaluations and seeing which vendors we want to continue working with and those that we need to seek new vendors for.
Yeah, absolutely. I've even had an iPad handed to me on my global excursion to Ecuador and the Galapagos, for example. And I was actually rating as we were completing the experiences, just so it wasn't such a lengthy survey when I returned. And I was super impressed with how quick and upfront EF was with getting my feedback and then responding to my feedback with, oh, that went well. Tell us more about that.
I'm going to build right off of that then in terms of feedback and that educational piece. So, and David, correct me if I'm wrong, you've had this experience as a Fulbrighter as well as myself, that we participated in some of the research part of it where we're doing journaling, we're doing reflection, and you know, we're seeing, okay, are we able to understand what's happening to us? Are we able to disseminate that and then be reflective later? What kind of things have you seen, and Ben, maybe from other teachers you've worked with, or David, from past experiences, ways to engage your students in being reflective during those experiences to be able to afterwards look back with the right type of perception?
I can take it from a group leader perspective that both of the trips that I've been on so far, the tour leader on the ground in the country, we have a nightly meeting every night to talk about the agenda and what's happening the next day. That's a standard practice on an EF tour. And that's with your entire group, which could be anywhere from 20 to 30. It depends on the country that you're going to. I pull my students aside after that meeting and it's sort of a little nightcap conversation where, based on the learning objectives that we accomplished that day, I build reflective questions in and I have them digitally journal. It can be as easy as them just typing on their phones, because they're always on their phones anyway. They ask for the Wi-Fi password the first time we get off the bus, no matter where we go. So I use that to my advantage. If they're going to have their faces in their phones, that's where they're going to keep their journals. And I build in reflective questions nightly after our group meeting.
That's what a lot of teachers and group leaders are doing. And it's, you know, how far do you want to take this? You know, how much do you want to prepare before you leave for the destination on what you're going to see and what you're going to learn, and then throughout the tour reflecting upon it. And then, you know, after you return, you kind of do this whole encompassing, you know, how does this relate to back to the US and what we're doing in the US?
Fantastic. I love that, right? It seems to be there's a method that works pretty well, but also it's open to interpretation depending on the teacher, depending on the country, and depending on the student set, right? That, you know, we'd shift things around a little bit. All right, so one last question, and this might be something that perks the ears of some of the educators that are tuning into this. I know I've had experience with this a little bit, taking groups of students around, and I actually have had some colleagues at a school that I taught at that worked with EF Tours and loved working with EF Tours. But one of the pitfalls of doing this whole trip planning sometimes is, how do we deal with the parents in the right way to make sure that they're properly informed about everything that's happening, but at the same time they're realistic about some of the things that inherently will occur when you go internationally, right? And so David, best practices from you, and Ben, some recommendations from EF. You know, how do we make sure that we're shepherding our parents forward at the same time with the students?
From a group leader's perspective, I bring my parents and guardians into all of my meetings with my students, especially when we've been meeting virtually so much. I do my best to communicate with my parents and guardians as much as I'm communicating with my students. Even though I'm seeing them in class every day, I'm email blasting, or I'm texting, or I'm checking in with my parents and guardians almost on a weekly basis prior to the trip. And we train the students. Many of them have never flown before, so I have them bring their carry-on luggage bags into the classroom. We practice packing. We practice going through airport security. And I think that gives peace of mind to the parents and guardians, because some of them have been through this process. And even then they start saying, here's a tip that I learned when I travel. And when you create that buy-in and involve them, they're a lot less apprehensive, and they seem to trust me so much more.
And I think that speaks a lot to the group leader, right? I think expectation setting is super important, of how much you're laying the groundwork before wheels are up on the plane. And as much as we are teaching these students how to be global citizens, at the same time, we're teaching parents to let go, right? How are we creating Facebook pages to post pictures that your son and daughter are still safe, but they don't need to be texting the group leader or even their child every single moment of every day?
I like that. I think a part of that global competency piece and a part of why we talk about things in the global context is that it takes a little bit of courage, right? It takes a little bit of growth. And a lot of times we have to allow ourselves to be a little uncomfortable to then be more comfortable with situations in the future. And I think, I don't know, I speak for myself and I think you guys as well, that when we go internationally, yeah, we do things that are a little crazy and put us a little awkward and put us in uncomfortable positions, but eventually we get more and more used to that. And that's when we really grow as individuals, right?
Yep.
Definitely.
Absolutely. All right. So last thing, as we're taking action, right? What's that one last tip? What's that one last piece of information that the teacher needs to take action?
I think for me, it's focusing on working smarter and not harder. That if we're going to go to an extra added expense of having the EF Tours company plan and run our itinerary for us, then I'm going to run with that extra time that I have to make that experience so much more special for my students and focus a little bit more on fundraising because I have the time to make it more affordable and achievable for the general population of students.
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, agriculture teachers from the few that I know are always the ones to say that you're not going to learn this from a textbook, right? And so just like your local agriculture, you're not going to learn international agriculture from a textbook or even locally either. So it's getting out, doing it, getting your hands dirty to come back and make those comparisons.
Fantastic. Well, let that be a call to action to anybody that's listening to this and tuning in and talking about the international space here, that in order to do it, right, you got to do it, right? And so we talk about this and we can look about these countries in a textbook and we can be privy to these lovely backgrounds that my two fellow gentlemen here have. But really to take action, you got to leave, right? You got to go and you got to seek that adventure. So gentlemen, I thank you very much for joining me today, and to all those listening, thank you very much. And be sure to turn in the rest of the week as we have more questions to ask and more questions to answer, and we continue to develop and explore this space on how to take action. Thank you.